What if the last thing you said to a friend was, "There's a figure appearing in my dreams every night," and that same night you disappeared? What if that casual conversation during a coffee break, that moment when you tried to share something that was bothering you, was the last time anyone saw you alive? What if the words you chose to describe your nightly fears became, hours later, the only clue the authorities had about what might have happened to you? This is not fiction. It's not a horror movie script. It's the true story of a 29-year-old nurse who, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, sat with her best friend and said, with a mixture of nervousness and an attempt at a joke, that a figure had been appearing in her dreams every night. And before the sun rose the next morning, it had vanished without a trace. The temporal connection is impossible to ignore. The conversation took place around 3 in the afternoon. By 2 in the morning the next day, she was no longer where she was supposed to be. Less than 11 hours. 11 hours between confessing that something in her dreams was scaring her and simply ceasing to exist in the physical world. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever had those dreams where the same presence, the same figure appears night after night? That feeling that it's not just your subconscious processing the day, but something more, something that seems to have a will of its own intention. Most of us dismiss these dreams as products of stress or anxiety. We drink chamomile tea, try to sleep better, and eventually the dreams stop. But what if they don't stop? What if they become more intense, more real, more frightening? What if, as in the case of this nurse, that figure in the dreams was a warning of something terrible that was about to happen? Her name was Jessica Martinez, and she worked the night shift at a hospital in San Antonio, Texas. She was the kind of professional colleagues described as dedicated, competent, always willing to cover extra shifts when needed. She had a normal life without drama, without known enemies, without apparent reasons to voluntarily disappear or be the target of violence. And yet, in November 2022, Jessica simply disappeared. And the last significant thing she said to anyone was about that figure in her dreams. Her friend, a woman named Rachel Torres, still carries the weight of that conversation to this day. Because at the time, when Jessica mentioned the figure, Rachel laughed nervously and joked about Jessica watching too many horror movies before bed. Jessica smiled, agreed that was probably all, and changed the subject. They finished their coffee, hugged, and Jessica said she would talk later. But later never came, and Rachel wonders every day since then if she had taken Jessica more seriously, if she had asked more questions, if she had insisted that Jessica tell her more details about the dreams, maybe something different would have happened. Maybe Jessica would still be here. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you and make you completely rethink how you react when someone close to you mentions fears that seem irrational. This isn't just a case of a mysterious disappearance. It's a case about the fine line between dreams and premonitions, between paranoia and genuine intuition, between dismissing someone's worries as nonsense and recognizing when something truly sinister is happening. The details that emerged in the days and weeks following Jessica's disappearance paint a disturbing picture of someone experiencing something far beyond ordinary nightmares. And the temporal urgency, the fact that she vanished the same night she finally verbalized her fears, suggests a connection that authorities have struggled to explain through mere coincidence. Was there something prophetic about that figure in Jessica's dreams? Or by talking about her, did Jessica inadvertently set events in motion that would lead to her disappearance? The case of Jessica Martinez is one of those mysteries that defies easy categorization. It doesn't fit neatly into any box we normally use to understand disappearances. And perhaps that's exactly why it needs to be told, studied, understood. Because sometimes the truth is stranger and more frightening than any conventional explanation we try to force upon it. Are you ready to meet Jessica Martinez? To understand the life she led, the work she did, the people who loved her? Because to truly grasp the weight of that last conversation with Rachel, to understand why the disappearance was so shocking and inexplicable, we first need to know the woman behind the mystery. But before we continue, I need to make a heartfelt request. If you're feeling that shiver, if this introduction has already made you think about those strange dreams you've had and never told anyone about, if you're realizing that this case touches on universal fears we all carry, About the line between the world of dreams and reality, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had recurring dreams with a specific presence or figure? Have you ever felt that irrational fear that later, over time, seemed to be a real warning? These accounts you share are fundamental because often the most impressive stories aren't in official police files, but in the personal experiences of people like you who paid attention when something seemed wrong, even if it didn't make rational sense. And look, if you're enjoying the content so far, if you're realizing that this isn't just another missing person case, but a deep exploration of intuition, premonitions, and the importance of taking genuine fear seriously, click that like button. It may seem like a small gesture, but it makes a huge difference. That's what shows the algorithm that stories like Jessica's, real cases treated with seriousness and respect, cases that make us reflect on how we react when someone close to us expresses fears that seem irrational, deserve to be seen by more people. Each like is a sign that you value this type of content that goes beyond sensationalism and truly tries to understand what happened. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the perfect time. Because every week I bring you real cases like Jessica's, disappearances involving premonitory dreams, people who tried to warn that something was wrong but weren't taken seriously, mysteries that force us to question, where coincidence ends and where something deeper and more inexplicable begins. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content that treats each victim with dignity while honestly exploring the most disturbing and inexplicable aspects of their stories. Don't forget to activate the notification bell too, because you won't want to miss any of these cases that I'll continue to bring you. Now that you're part of this community of people who understand that sometimes reality is stranger than we admit, let's get to know who Jessica Martinez was. Because understanding who she was makes what happened to her even more impactful and impossible to explain. Jessica was 29 years old when she disappeared in November 2022. She was a registered nurse working at Methodist Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, one of the largest medical facilities in the region. Jessica had been in the profession for 6 years, having graduated from the University of Texas at Austin at age 23. Co-workers described her as exactly the kind of nurse you would want caring for you or someone you love. Competent, caring, calm under pressure, and with that rare balance between professionalism and genuine empathy. Physically, Jessica was a woman of average height, about 5 feet 3 inches, with dark brown hair that she usually tied up in a practical bun for work. She had expressive brown eyes and a smile that colleagues said could brighten even the toughest shifts. She wasn't vain, but she took care of herself, liking to wear red lipstick on her days off, something that became something of her trademark among friends. She wore glasses occasionally when she was tired, but preferred contact lenses during her hospital shifts. Jessica's personal life was stable and, by all outward standards, happy. She lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in a safe, quiet neighborhood in San Antonio, about 20 minutes from the hospital. The Eastside apartment was small but tidy, decorated with plants she meticulously cared for and photos of family and friends. Jessica was the kind of person who turned any space into a home. She always had scented candles burning, always had fresh coffee brewed, and always made people feel welcome. She came from a close and loving Mexican-American family. Her parents, Miguel and Rosa Martinez, lived in a smaller town about an hour south of San Antonio. Jessica was the middle child, with an older brother, Carlos, who worked as a teacher, and a younger sister, Sophia, who was in college studying medicine. Inspired by her sister's career, the family gathered at least once a month for Sunday lunches at her parents' house, a tradition Jessica rarely missed. Rosa later said that Jessica had been there that last Sunday before her disappearance, had eaten her favorite food, tamales made by her mother, and seemed normal, perhaps a little tired, but nothing to raise alarms. In terms of romantic relationships, Jessica was single at the time of her disappearance. She had ended a 2-year relationship about 6 months prior, an amicable breakup where both agreed they were at different stages of life. Her ex-boyfriend, a man named David Chen, who worked in IT, was extensively investigated after her disappearance and completely ruled out as a suspect. They maintained occasional and friendly contact, and David was genuinely devastated when he learned that Jessica had disappeared. Jessica's typical weekday routine was predictable and structured. She worked 3 12-hour shifts a week, usually from 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning, in the hospital's emergency department. It was a physically and emotionally demanding job, dealing with everything from minor injuries to severe trauma. But Jessica loved what she did, often talking about the importance of being there for people during the worst moments of their lives. On her days off, Jessica had a relaxing routine. She liked going to the gym in the morning. She wasn't a fitness fanatic, but she believed in staying active. She did yoga occasionally, saying it helped her process work stress. She enjoyed reading, mainly historical romances and psychological thrillers, ironically. She had a book club with some friends where they met once a month to discuss their chosen book and basically use it as an excuse to drink wine and catch up. Rachel Torres, the friend who received that last confidence about the figure in her dreams, had been Jessica's best friend since nursing school. They had met on the first day of class, sat together by chance, and developed a deep friendship over the stressful years of study. Rachel was also a nurse, working at a different hospital but in the same city. They saw each other at least once a week, usually for coffee or lunch when their schedules allowed. Jessica's outlook on life was generally positive and pragmatic. She wasn't particularly religious, but had a casual spirituality, believing in energy and intuition without being overly New Age. Colleagues said Jessica had that sixth sense about patients, instinctively knowing when someone was getting worse before the monitors showed it, when someone was hiding symptoms, when a family needed extra support. It was part of what made her an exceptional nurse, that ability to read people and situations with remarkable accuracy. Financially, Jessica was stable. She wasn't rich, but she earned a good living as an emergency room nurse, paid her bills comfortably, had some savings, and had no significant debts besides a small student loan payment that was almost paid off. There were no financial pressures that could suggest a reason to voluntarily disappear or get involved in something dangerous. In terms of mental health, Jessica had never been diagnosed with any condition. She had never been to formal therapy, although she would occasionally joke that everyone who works in emergency medicine probably should. She dealt with work stress in healthy ways, had good support systems, knew when she needed a mental health day, and took one when necessary. There was no history of depression, clinical anxiety, or any other problem that might suggest an impending crisis. Her hobbies included cooking, something she had learned from her mother and took seriously. Jessica frequently experimented with new recipes and invited friends over for dinner. She enjoyed music, having eclectic tastes ranging from traditional Latin music to American indie rock. She occasionally went to concerts when artists she liked came to San Antonio. She liked watching TV series to relax, especially light comedies, because she said she saw enough drama at work. Jessica's impact on those around her was genuine and positive. Patients frequently mentioned her specifically in hospital evaluations, thanking her for her care and compassion. Colleagues saw her as someone they could trust, especially younger nurses whom Jessica was always willing to mentor. Her family adored her, friends considered her loyal and fun, and even casual acquaintances had kind things to say about her. There was nothing in Jessica Martinez's life that suggested imminent danger or reason to disappear. She wasn't involved in anything dangerous or illegal. She had no known enemies. She wasn't indebted to the wrong people. She wasn't having a mental breakdown. She was, in every measurable way, an ordinary person living a stable and fulfilling life. And perhaps that's precisely why what happened to her is so disturbing. Because if it can happen to someone like Jessica, someone so firmly anchored in normalcy, it can happen to anyone. If you're realizing now that Jessica wasn't just another name in a statistic, but a real person with a full life and people who loved her, comment below. She had everything to live for. Because now we need to meet Rachel and understand exactly what Jessica said in that last conversation. Rachel Torres was 30 years old at the time of Jessica's disappearance, just 1 year older than her best friend. The two had become inseparable since that first day at nursing school when they sat together and realized they shared the same sarcastic sense of humor and the same genuine passion for helping people. Over the years, they had supported each other through difficult exams, stressful internships, relationship breakups, the deaths of patients that deeply affected them, and all the small and large crises that make up a friendship of almost a decade. Rachel worked as a nurse at the university hospital on the other side of town. She and Jessica didn't work together, but they kept in constant contact, daily text messages, calls when they had something important to share, and those regular coffee or lunch dates that were sacred in their always busy schedules. Their friendship was the kind where you can go weeks without seeing each other in person, but when you finally meet, it's as if no time has passed. That Thursday, November 10th, 2022, was a day off for both of them. They had arranged to meet at their favorite Starbucks, located halfway between where each of them lived. Rachel arrived first, around 2:45 p.m., ordered her usual caramel macchiato, and took their favorite corner table near the window. Jessica arrived about 10 minutes later, ordered a cappuccino and a slice of lemon cake, and joined Rachel with a tired smile. The conversation began, as it always did, with work updates, light gossip about colleagues, and funny complaints about difficult patients. Rachel noticed that Jessica seemed more tired than usual, with pronounced dark circles under her eyes. But emergency room nurses always look tired, so it wasn't something that immediately raised alarms. They talked about plans for the upcoming holiday season, about Jessica's mother's birthday the following week, and about a new Netflix series they were both watching. It was about 20 minutes after Jessica arrived, when the conversation had settled into that comfortable rhythm of close friends, that Jessica changed the subject in a way that Rachel later described as strangely abrupt. Jessica was stirring her coffee, looking at the cup instead of at Rachel, and said almost casually, "So I have to tell you something kind of strange that's been happening to me." Rachel, perhaps expecting a funny story about some unusual coworker or patient, said something like, "Oh no, what now?" And Jessica, still avoiding direct eye contact, replied, "There's a figure appearing in my dreams every night." Rachel admits that her first reaction was to laugh lightly, thinking Jessica was about to tell some funny or embarrassing story. She said something like "figure like a mysterious crush," trying to keep the tone light, but Jessica didn't laugh. She finally looked at Rachel, and there was something in her expression, a seriousness that made Rachel stop smiling. Jessica said, "No, not like that. It's hard to explain. It's not a person, or at least I don't think it is. It's more like a presence, a silhouette. It's been in my dreams every night for almost 2 weeks." The shift in the tone of the conversation was palpable. Rachel felt that discomfort that comes when a casual conversation suddenly becomes serious in a way you weren't prepared for. Rachel asked, trying to understand, "What do you mean, a silhouette? Can't you see a face or a body?" Jessica thought for a moment, before replying, "It's like it's made of shadow, but dense shadow, you know? Like the darkness has a shape, it's always standing in the corner of whatever I'm dreaming about. It doesn't move much, it just stays there, watching me." Rachel felt a chill upon hearing this, but was still trying to process it rationally. She asked if Jessica thought it was work stress, if maybe she was watching too many horror movies before bed. Jessica chuckled slightly at that last suggestion and said, "You know, I hate horror movies. And yes, I thought it was stress at first too, but Rachel, every night, the same figure in the same place, just standing there watching me, and it's getting closer. In the first dreams, it was far away. I could barely tell it was there. But in the last few nights, it's closer. Much closer. Last night it was so close I could feel, I don't know how to describe it, like I could feel intent coming from it." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because Rachel's reaction at that moment is so human and so universally understandable. She was torn between taking her friend seriously and trying to rationalize the experience in some less frightening way. Rachel asked if Jessica had tried not to sleep, or if she woke up when she saw the figure. Jessica said she tried to stay awake one night, but eventually fell asleep from exhaustion. And yes, she usually woke up soon after noticing the figure, but the damage was already done. That image stayed with her for the rest of the day. Rachel, wanting to be a good friend but also not wanting to fuel what might just be anxiety, suggested that maybe Jessica should consider talking to someone, perhaps a therapist or even her doctor, just to rule out anything physical like a medication side effect or sleep problem. Jessica nodded, said she had thought about it, but also said something Rachel never forgot. "I know it sounds crazy, Rach. I know, but it doesn't feel like a normal dream. It feels like something is trying to reach me, or warn me, or I don't know." Rachel's decision at that moment was to try to alleviate Jessica's fears without fully validating them. She said something like, "Look, our brains do strange things when we're tired and stressed. You've been working a lot of overtime lately. Maybe your subconscious is just trying to tell you to slow down." Jessica smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Yes, you're probably right." But the impact of that response, the way Jessica closed the subject so quickly after that forced smile, is something that haunts Rachel to this day. They changed the subject after that. They talked about lighter things. They finished their coffee. Jessica took the bill this time, insisting despite Rachel's protests. They hugged in the parking lot, a normal hug between friends who see each other regularly. Jessica said, "See you next week?" And Rachel said, "Sure, text me." And then they got into their respective cars and drove away. Rachel home for a quiet afternoon. Jessica for what would become the last hours of her known life. Behind the scenes of that conversation, there was something Rachel only realized in retrospect. Jessica had tried multiple times to steer the conversation back to the figure in the dreams, but each time she tried to elaborate, Rachel inadvertently redirected it to rational explanations or changed the subject. Not out of malice, but because it's uncomfortable to sit with fears that lack logical explanation. It's easier to soothe, rationalize, normalize, but sometimes, as Rachel learned the hard way, that discomfort we feel when someone shares something strange is precisely when we need to stop and truly listen. Rachel's emotional journey from that afternoon until now has been one of deep guilt and self-recrimination. She has given dozens of interviews to investigators and the media, always returning to that moment in the cafe, always wondering what would have happened if she had taken Jessica more seriously, if she had asked more questions, if she had insisted that Jessica stay with her that night instead of going to work, if she had validated Jessica's fears instead of trying to rationalize them. After Jessica disappeared, Rachel spent hours with investigators trying to remember every detail of that conversation at the coffee shop. And although it took time, with the help of investigative interview techniques, Rachel managed to reconstruct much more than she had consciously realized at the time. Because sometimes when someone tells us something disturbing, our brain registers more information than we actively process, a kind of defensive memory that we only access when forced to really pay attention. Jessica had described the figure as having no discernible gender. It wasn't male or female in the traditional sense. Rachel remembered Jessica using the words neither male nor female, or perhaps both or neither. It was humanoid in general form. It had that basic structure of head, torso, limbs, but everything was indistinct, as if you were looking at a person through frosted glass or through dense fog. The only consistent thing was that it was dark, darker than the normal shadows in dreams. The figure's height was difficult to determine, Jessica said, because perspective in dreams is strange. But she had the impression that it was tall, taller than an average person, and there was something about the proportions that was slightly off, though Jessica couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Perhaps the arms were a little too long, or the head a little too big, or the overall shape was more slender than human bodies actually are. Just subtly off, enough to create that visceral sense of strangeness that your brain recognizes before your conscious mind can articulate it. The figure never spoke, at least not with audible words. Jessica was very clear about that. There was no dialogue, no sounds coming from it. But Jessica said something that Rachel only remembered days later when interviewed, something about how she knew things when the figure was present. They weren't exactly her thoughts. They were more like knowledge that appeared in her mind when she looked at the figure, and the knowledge was always the same. You need to pay attention, something is coming, you need to see. The sensation the figure evoked in Jessica was complex and had evolved over the 2 weeks of dreams. At first it was just discomfort, that feeling of being watched, that we all recognize as unsettling but not necessarily threatening. But as the days passed and the figure appeared closer in each dream, the sensation changed to something closer to dread. Jessica described it to Rachel as a pressure in her chest, a difficulty breathing even within the dream, a primal fear that she couldn't rationalize, but that was absolutely real while she was experiencing it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because the specific details about how the dreams were progressing are crucial to understanding Jessica's mental state in the last weeks of her life. Rachel remembered Jessica saying that the figure had first appeared about 2 weeks before that Thursday at the cafe. The first dream was vague. Jessica only had the feeling upon waking that something had been watching her, but she couldn't recall clear details. But subsequent dreams became progressively more defined and more disturbing. In the second dream, Jessica actually managed to see the figure for the first time, standing far away in what appeared to be a dark hallway. In the third dream, the figure was closer, and Jessica could distinguish the humanoid form. In the fourth dream, she realized that the figure was present in all her dreams, no matter what the dream was about. It could be a dream about work, or about being back at her parents' house, or about shopping. But always, in the corner of her peripheral vision, there was the figure. The increasing distance was what frightened Jessica the most. Each night, the figure was a few steps closer. She described it to Rachel as a slow, inevitable countdown, and what made it even more disturbing was that Jessica began to feel that when the figure finally got close enough, when it was within reach of her touch, something definitive would happen. She didn't know what, but the certainty of that feeling was inescapable. Jessica also mentioned to Rachel that the dreams were affecting her sleep in practical ways. She was waking up frequently, sometimes several times a night, always right after noticing the figure in the dreams. This meant that even though she was technically getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep, the quality of her sleep was terrible. She was waking up tired, remained tired all day, and was afraid to sleep at night because she knew the figure would be there waiting. There was one specific detail Rachel remembered under investigative hypnosis, a technique she voluntarily underwent in hopes of helping find her friend. Jessica had said something about the figure's eyes, or rather the absence of them. She said that where there should have been eyes, there was only deeper darkness, like holes in the already dark silhouette. But even without visible eyes, Jessica was absolutely certain that the figure was looking directly at her, intensely focused on her, in a way that made every cell in her body want to flee. Jessica also described that in her most recent dreams, she consciously tried to move away from the figure, tried to run or turn around, but found she couldn't. It was as if her feet were stuck, or as if no matter where she turned, the figure was always in her field of vision. That partial paralysis, that inability to escape even within her own dreams, was contributing to the growing terror Jessica felt. One particularly disturbing aspect that Jessica mentioned was that she began to feel the figure's presence, even when awake. She saw nothing when she opened her eyes in the middle of the night, but she had that unmistakable feeling of being watched, of not being alone, even though she rationally knew she was in her locked apartment. Jessica checked the rooms, looked under the bed and in the closet like a child, feeling ridiculous but unable to shake off that feeling of presence. There was also the fact that Jessica began to have difficulty distinguishing when she was awake and when she was dreaming in the first few hours after waking up. She described moments where she would wake up, or think she was waking up, only to realize minutes or hours later that she was still dreaming. And during these false awakenings, the figure was always there, closer than ever, sometimes standing beside her bed, looking down at where she was lying. Rachel remembered Jessica saying in the coffee shop conversation, in a low voice and with her eyes avoiding direct contact, "Last night was the worst so far. The figure was so close I could have touched it if I'd reached out. And I felt like it was trying to show me something. Like there was something I should be seeing or understanding, but I wasn't. And there's this growing urgency, like time is running out for whatever it is I should be noticing." The impact of these dreams on Jessica's daily life was becoming impossible to ignore. She was tired all the time, making small mistakes at work that she never had before, and becoming forgetful and distracted. Colleagues had noticed and asked if everything was all right. Jessica made excuses about not sleeping well, about being under pressure, but she wouldn't talk about the figure because she was ashamed of sounding crazy. And there was one last detail that Rachel remembered only weeks after the disappearance, a detail so disturbing that she initially questioned whether it was a real memory or something her traumatized brain had invented. Jessica had said, almost as an afterthought as they were getting up to leave, "The cafe. You know what's even stranger? I have a feeling I've seen this figure before, not in dreams but in real life. Like it was someone or something that crossed my path and I just didn't consciously register it at the time. And now it's in my dreams trying to make me remember." If you're feeling that shiver down your spine right now, if you're realizing that Jessica wasn't just having nightmares, but something that genuinely sounded like a warning or premonition, write this down. The figure was trying to warn her. Because now we need to talk about that final shift at the hospital. After saying goodbye to Rachel in the Starbucks parking lot around 4 o'clock that Thursday afternoon, Jessica returned to her apartment. Records from her car in the building's parking system show that she arrived home at 4:23. Neighbors didn't see her during that time, but that wasn't unusual. Jessica usually went straight into her apartment and didn't socialize much in the building during the week. She had a scheduled shift at the hospital starting at 7 in the evening, which gave her about 2.5 hours at home. Based on evidence later found in the apartment and Jessica's known routine, investigators reconstructed that she likely spent that time preparing for work. There was a half-empty cup of tea in the kitchen sink, still with the tea bag inside, suggesting she had made tea but hadn't finished it. There were clean clothes folded on the bed, as if she had taken them out of the dryer and planned to put them away, but hadn't gotten around to it. The nursing uniform she would wear was hanging in the bathroom, already prepared. Everything indicated normal preparation for another shift. Jessica left the apartment at 6:35 a.m., according to the building's security cameras. She was wearing her navy blue nurse's uniform, comfortable white sneakers, and carrying her large bag containing snacks, a water bottle, and other items necessary for a 12-hour shift. She appeared normal in the footage, perhaps a little tired, but nothing that suggested distress or fear. She checked her cell phone as she walked to her car, probably checking messages or the time. The drive from Jessica's apartment to Methodist Hospital normally took about 20 minutes. Traffic cameras captured her at 2 points along the way, and in both images, she is simply driving normally, with no indication of being followed or deviating from her usual route. She arrived at the hospital's employee parking lot at 6:57, 3 minutes before her shift officially started at 7, which was typical of her. Jessica was always punctual, usually arriving a few minutes early. Jessica's arrival at the hospital was registered by the electronic badge system at exactly 7 o'clock. She quickly passed through the women's locker room, stored her personal belongings in her designated locker, and went directly to the emergency department's nursing room for the start of shift briefing. The head nurse that night, a woman named Patricia Gonzalez, who had worked with Jessica for 4 years, conducted the meeting at 7:15. Patricia later remembered that Jessica was present and seemed to be paying attention, but she was quieter than usual. Jessica usually asked questions during briefings or contributed observations about patients she had treated on previous shifts, but that night she mostly just listened. Patricia even asked if Jessica was feeling well, and Jessica replied that she was, just a little tired. Patricia accepted the answer because, again, emergency room nurses are always a little tired. The shift officially began at 7:30 when the day shift handed over all active patients to the night shift. Jessica was assigned to the acute care ward, handling cases that needed immediate medical attention, but weren't life or death trauma. Her first patient of the night was a 60-year-old man with chest pain that turned out to be just severe indigestion. Jessica treated him with her usual competence and kindness, ran all necessary checks, administered medication as prescribed, and the patient was discharged around 9 p.m. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because the details of Jessica's last hours at work were meticulously documented by investigators, and there are some specific moments that, in retrospect, seem significant. Around 8:30 during a brief break, Jessica was in the staff break room with 2 other nurses, Maria Santos and Kevin Liu. They were chatting about nothing in particular, the kind of small talk that helps break the monotony of a long shift. Maria later remembered that Jessica seemed momentarily distracted, looking at the corner of the room as if she had seen or heard something. Maria asked, "Jess, are you okay?" And Jessica blinked, refocused, and said, "Sorry, yes, I'm fine. I just thought I saw something." Maria and Kevin exchanged glances, but didn't think much of it at the moment. Tired people see things out of the corner of their eye all the time, especially in hospitals with harsh fluorescent lighting and long, monotonous corridors. But there was a second incident, around 10 o'clock at night, which a nursing assistant named Jennifer Park mentioned in her testimony. Jennifer was walking down a hallway and passed Jessica, who was standing looking out a window overlooking the parking lot. Jennifer said, "Hey, Jessica," but Jessica didn't respond immediately, seeming lost in thought. Jennifer gently touched Jessica's arm, who visibly jumped. Jessica said, "I'm sorry, I was 1,000 miles away," and smiled in a way that Jennifer described as tense. Jennifer asked if Jessica had seen anything outside, and Jessica said, "No, nothing," and quickly changed the subject. At 11:15, Jessica was treating an elderly patient who had fallen at home and fractured her hip. The patient's family was present, visibly anxious, and Jessica spent extra time explaining the procedure, calming concerns, being the kind of compassionate nurse she always was. The patient's daughter later remembered Jessica as an angel, saying she made her mother feel safe during a frightening moment. There was nothing in Jessica's behavior with that family to suggest that she herself was frightened or disturbed. At midnight, Jessica took her official meal break. The hospital has a cafeteria that's open 24 hours a day for employees, but Jessica usually preferred to eat what she brought from home in the break room. That night, security cameras show Jessica going to the cafeteria, buying only a coffee, and then returning to the break room. She ate alone, which wasn't entirely unusual, but also not typical of her. Jessica generally enjoyed socializing during breaks. It was part of what helped her cope with work stress. Kevin Liu entered the break room around 12:20 and found Jessica staring at her phone screen with a worried expression. He asked if everything was all right at home, assuming she might have received bad news from her family. Jessica said, "No, everything's fine," but then hesitated and asked Kevin something he found strange. "Have you ever had dreams that seem more real than normal dreams? Like they're, like memories of something that hasn't happened yet?" Kevin, lacking context for the question and being a very practical and scientific person himself, laughed and said something like, "Dude, I think you need more sleep." Jessica laughed too, but Kevin said her laughter sounded forced. She didn't elaborate, just finished her snack and went back to work. Kevin mentioned this conversation to investigators because it was the only time Jessica had talked about dreams with anyone other than Rachel. The shift continued until approximately 1:30 a.m., when there was a temporary lull. Emergencies have unpredictable rhythms, periods of absolute chaos followed by windows of relative calm. During this lull, Jessica was doing paperwork at the nursing station, updating patient records on the computer. Patricia Gonzalez, the head nurse, was working next to her and noticed that Jessica seemed to be typing something on her personal cell phone, which technically wasn't allowed during work hours, but everyone did occasionally. Patricia didn't see what Jessica was typing, but she noticed that Jessica deleted everything before sending, as if she had changed her mind about what she was about to say. Investigators later gained access to Jessica's cell phone records and discovered that she had started typing a message to Rachel at that exact time, but didn't send it. The automatically saved drafts showed that she was writing something about, "I saw her awake today," but the rest was deleted before it could be recovered. At 2 in the morning, Jessica had her last documented patient interaction. It was a young man in his early 20s who had arrived with a laceration on his arm from a work accident. Jessica cleaned and bandaged the wound, being as kind and efficient as always. The patient later described her as seeming normal, maybe a little tired, but professional. He was the last known patient to see Jessica Martinez. At 2:43 a.m., Jessica told Patricia Gonzalez she was going to take a quick break to use the restroom. Patricia nodded, absorbed in her own paperwork. Nurses take short breaks during long shifts all the time. Jessica was seen walking down the main hallway of the emergency department by a lab technician named Amy Chen, who was going in the opposite direction. Amy said a casual hi. Jessica returned the greeting, and that was the last confirmed sighting of Jessica Martinez inside the hospital. But this is where things get strange. Jessica never returned from what should have been a 5-minute break. Patricia began to notice her absence around 3:15, approximately 30 minutes later. Initially, she wasn't alarmed, assuming that perhaps Jessica had found another nurse who needed help. But when 3:30 arrived and Jessica still hadn't returned, Patricia began to search. She checked the women's staff restrooms, empty. She checked the break room, empty. She checked the cafeteria. She wasn't there. Patricia started asking colleagues if anyone had seen Jessica. No one had. That's when Patricia began to feel that genuine concern that comes when you realize something is wrong. At 3:45, Patricia went to Jessica's locker. The locker was locked, which meant Jessica hadn't taken her things and left. She then went to hospital security and asked to check the cameras. What the security cameras showed was both enlightening and deeply disturbing. At 2:45 a.m., cameras captured Jessica walking down the hallway toward the restrooms. But instead of going in, Jessica kept walking. She passed the restrooms, continued to the end of that hallway, and made a turn that led her to a less used area of the hospital near storage rooms. The cameras in that area were more sparse. Jessica's next recording is at 2:49, and she's standing in an empty hallway near an emergency exit door. And this is where it gets really strange. Jessica is standing completely still, staring at something out of the camera's reach. Her posture is tense, her body leaning slightly back as if she's recoiling from something. She remains like this for almost a full minute. And then, at 2:50, Jessica moves. But her movement is hesitant, almost reluctant. She walks toward the emergency exit door. She pushes the door, which should have triggered an alarm but was apparently malfunctioning. And Jessica exits. The external camera in that side parking lot shows Jessica emerging through the door at 2:51. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happens in this exterior footage is what makes Jessica's case so extraordinarily disturbing. Jessica walks out the door and takes just a few steps into the parking lot, and then she stops, completely, and looks to her left, to a dimly lit area of the parking lot near dumpsters and a tree fence. Jessica stands still, staring in that direction for approximately 30 seconds. During that time, her body language is that of someone seeing something, reacting to something. She brings her hand to her mouth in a gesture of surprise or fear. She takes a small step back, and then, inexplicably, she begins to walk toward that dark area. Not running, not being visibly pursued, but walking deliberately, almost as if she were being pulled. The camera manages to capture Jessica, reaching the edge of the illuminated area. She hesitates there for a moment, on the border between light and darkness, and then she takes another step, and another, and disappears into the shadows near the dumpsters. The camera never captures her emerging on the other side. She simply enters the shadows and ceases to exist in the visual record. When Patricia saw the footage along with the security guard at around 4:15, she immediately asked them to call the police and organize a search. Hospital security guards were sent to the side parking lot while they waited for the police. They found the parking lot empty. They went to the area near the dumpsters where Jessica had been seen. Using flashlights, they searched for signs of her. What they found was disturbing in its normalcy. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no torn clothing. But there were footprints. Jessica's footprints were visible in the thin layer of dust near the fence, and the highs. Footprints led up to the fence and then stopped. There were no footprints on the other side. There were no signs that anyone had climbed. The footprints simply ended. The police arrived at 4:35. Detective Marcus Williams was the first investigator on the scene. He immediately established the area as a potential crime scene and ordered an extensive search. Sniffer dogs were brought in. The dogs followed Jessica's trail to the exact same point where the footprints stopped and then completely lost the scent. A search of the surrounding area, including the vacant lot beyond the fence and adjacent streets, revealed no further clues. There were no cameras covering that specific area. There were no witnesses. There was no evidence of a waiting vehicle or anyone else present. The impact of the revelation that Jessica had simply vanished within a few meters was profound, because it didn't make physical sense. People don't simply evaporate. There has to be a body or signs of abduction or evidence of an exit. But with Jessica, there were only those footsteps leading to a specific point and then nothing. And when investigators eventually spoke with Rachel and learned about the dreams, about the shadowy figure that was getting progressively closer, there was an unsettling recognition of impossible parallels. Jessica had said the figure was in the shadows, made of dense darkness, and Jessica disappeared, deliberately walking into the shadows as if something there was calling to her. Jessica had said she felt a presence even when awake, and in the footage she was clearly reacting to something, looking at something in that dark area. The last message Jessica had tried to send Rachel, the one that began, "I saw her awake today," but was deleted, took on a sinister meaning. Was she seeing the figure not only in her dreams but also in the waking world? And if so, was she seeing something real, or was she hallucinating? And more importantly, if she was seeing something real, what was it? And how was it able to make her voluntarily walk towards her own disappearance? If you're only now realizing that the way Jessica disappeared strangely mirrors the dreams she described, write this down. The dreams were real, because now we need to talk about how the investigation tried to make sense of the impossible. The official investigation into Jessica Martinez's disappearance began immediately after the hospital called the police at 4:15 a.m. on November 11th, 2022. Marcus Williams, a veteran investigator with 15 years of experience, led the team. The first 24 hours are critical, and Williams knew this. He mobilized resources quickly, treating the case with utmost urgency from the outset. The first order of business was to review all the hospital's security footage in forensic detail. Williams and his team spent hours watching and re-watching those images of Jessica walking down the hallways, stopping and looking at something invisible, and then walking out to the parking lot. Video analysis experts were brought in to examine the footage frame by frame. One of the questions investigators tried to answer was whether there was another person visible at any point in the footage. Meticulous analysis revealed that Jessica was completely alone in all the videos. There was no one in the area when she stopped and looked in that specific direction. There was no one visible in the parking lot when she left. The exterior footage was particularly frustrating because the area where Jessica walked was beyond the reach of adequate lighting. Simultaneously, the forensic team searched the physical location where Jessica was last seen. The area near the dumpsters and the fence was treated as a potential crime scene. Every inch was photographed, measured, and documented. Jessica's footprints were cast in plaster. The team looked for fibers, hair, evidence of a struggle, anything that could indicate what had happened. What they found was disturbingly minimalist. Aside from Jessica's footprints, which ended abruptly, there was very little physical evidence. No hair that wasn't Jessica's, no fibers from unfamiliar clothing, no sign of blood, no tire tracks. The fence showed no signs of having been climbed. The ground beyond the fence showed no footprints or disturbance. The sniffer dogs were crucial in the initial investigation. 2 different dogs were used, both trained for search and rescue. Both followed Jessica's trail from the hospital through the parking lot to that specific point near the fence, and then both completely lost the trail. The handlers said that this usually indicates that the person got into a vehicle, but since there was no evidence of a vehicle, they were left without an explanation. Jessica's car was located still in the employee parking lot. The vehicle was thoroughly searched. There were no signs of disturbance. Her keys, wallet, and cell phone were all still in her locker in the changing room. This was significant because it suggested that Jessica had not planned to leave the hospital permanently. People who plan to disappear voluntarily usually carry at least identification. Now I want to delve even deeper into this matter, because the investigation of Jessica's cell phone revealed some disturbing clues. Investigators obtained a warrant to access all the phone's records. What they found painted a picture of someone genuinely concerned about what she was experiencing. In the 14 days leading up to her disappearance, Jessica had extensively researched recurring dreams, dream interpretation, shadow figures in dreams, and sleep paralysis. She had visited online forums about paranormal experiences, looking for others who had had similar dreams. She had read medical articles about sleep disorders and hallucinations. Jessica was clearly trying to understand what was happening. There were also drafts of unsent messages on Jessica's cell phone. Investigators found a message dated 3 days earlier, intended for her mother, which read, "Mom, I have to tell you about something strange," but it was deleted before being sent. There was another draft message from a week earlier that read, "I don't know if I'm going crazy or if this is real, but I need someone to know in case something happens to me." This last message was particularly shocking because it suggested that Jessica had some level of premonition that something might happen to her. But she never sent the message, never formally warned anyone beyond that casual conversation with Rachel. Rachel Torres was interviewed extensively by Detective Williams the day after the disappearance. It was during this interview that Rachel, devastated and terribly blaming herself, recounted the conversation at the cafe. She detailed everything Jessica had said about the figure in her dreams, about how it was getting closer, about the feeling of being watched. Williams' initial reaction to the information about the dreams was one of professional skepticism. He had worked on dozens of missing persons cases, and dreams were rarely useful evidence. But the more he listened to Rachel describe the specific details, the more he began to consider that perhaps there were connections he couldn't completely ignore. Particularly disturbing was the parallel between Jessica describing the figure as being made of dense shadow and the fact that Jessica literally disappeared, walking into the shadows. And Jessica's description of feeling that the figure was trying to warn her about something resonated strangely with the way she stopped and looked at that specific area. Williams decided to treat the dreams not as evidence of paranormal phenomena, but as possible insight into Jessica's mental state. He brought in a forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Alan Rodriguez, to review everything. Dr. Rodriguez suggested that Jessica might have been experiencing the onset of a psychotic episode, possibly triggered by sleep deprivation and stress. In this interpretation, the figure would be a hallucination that began confined to sleep but eventually bled into waking life. The footage of Jessica looking at something invisible and walking into a dark area would be consistent with someone responding to hallucinations. But this theory had problems, mainly the fact that Jessica had functioned normally up until the moment of her disappearance. Jessica's family was notified on the morning of November 11th. Their reaction was one of absolute shock. Miguel and Rosa Martinez drove immediately to San Antonio. When they arrived, they were interviewed by Williams. They insisted that Jessica had no history of mental health problems, that she was happy and stable. When Williams mentioned the dreams, Rosa remembered Jessica seeming a little more tired that last Sunday, but Jessica hadn't mentioned anything about disturbing dreams. Behind the scenes of the investigation, several lines of inquiry were pursued simultaneously. One team checked for known sexual predators near the hospital. Another team interviewed all staff and patients who had been at the hospital during Jessica's shift. A third team reviewed old missing persons cases, looking for similar patterns. The physical search expanded to increasingly wider areas around the hospital. Vacant lots were searched, drainage systems checked, and wooded areas explored. Helicopters with thermal cameras flew over the region. Nothing was found. It's as if Jessica had simply ceased to exist at that specific point. As the investigation into Jessica's disappearance dragged on without significant progress, Detective Williams began to broaden the scope in less conventional ways. He assigned Detective Sarah Chen to investigate whether there were other similar cases in the area or among healthcare professionals working night shifts. What she discovered was both enlightening and deeply unsettling. The first revelation came from an analysis of missing persons cases in San Antonio over the past decade. Sarah found 3 cases that bore striking similarities to Jessica's disappearance. All 3 involved healthcare professionals working night shifts. All had disappeared in ways that defied simple explanation, leaving behind personal belongings. None of the 3 were found. Even more disturbing was the fact that in 2 of these 3 cases, there were mentions in interviews of the victim having trouble sleeping or strange dreams in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. No one had considered this significant at the time. But now, in the context of Jessica's case, these comments took on a different weight. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when Sarah began researching more broadly the experiences of healthcare professionals working night shifts, she uncovered a rarely discussed hidden truth. Chronic sleep deprivation, which is endemic among emergency room nurses, is associated with a variety of unusual perceptual phenomena. Scientific studies that Sarah found documented that people suffering from severe sleep deprivation frequently report visual hallucinations, particularly during the transition period between being awake and asleep. These hypnagogic hallucinations can be extremely vivid and often involve perceptions of presences or figures. In extreme cases, these hallucinations can bleed into the waking state. But there was also another body of evidence, less scientific, but no less interesting. Online forums for nurses were full of anecdotal accounts of strange experiences during night shifts. Many professionals reported feeling presences in empty hallways, seeing shadows, hearing voices or footsteps when no one else was around. Most attributed these experiences to fatigue or the naturally eerie atmosphere of hospitals at night. Sarah found a particularly interesting thread on a nursing forum where someone had asked, "Does anyone else see the shadow figure?" The thread had hundreds of replies, many from nurses saying yes, they occasionally saw what they described as a dark presence during night shifts. Most laughed it off, treating it as a strange but harmless shared experience. But there were some comments in that thread that were more troubling. A nurse in Chicago had written 3 years earlier that the shadowy figure had appeared in her dreams for weeks before she began seeing it during shifts. Another nurse in Boston had described experiences almost identical to Jessica's, a figure in her dreams that got progressively closer, a feeling of being watched. That post was from 5 years ago, and there were no subsequent comments from that user. Sarah tried to track down these specific users through their usernames, but both had deleted their accounts or stopped posting altogether. There was no way to know if they were okay or if something had happened to them. The investigation also focused specifically on the Methodist hospital where Jessica worked. Sarah interviewed dozens of employees, asking about unusual experiences. What she discovered was that the hospital had its own informal mythology among staff. There were stories about certain corridors being haunted, about ghost patients, about certain rooms having strange sensations. But there was one specific story that multiple long-time employees mentioned independently. About 15 years earlier, an entire ward had been temporarily closed after a series of deaths attributed to a nurse who was intentionally administering incorrect medication. 5 patients had died. The ward was renovated and reopened, but employees said that part of it had always had a strange energy ever since. Interestingly, the acute care area where Jessica worked was located partially in that renovated wing. Sarah didn't know what to make of this information. Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something about that specific physical space? Sarah's scientific mindset resisted supernatural conclusions, but she also couldn't ignore patterns. There was also the question of geographical location. San Antonio is built upon multiple layers of history, with ancient tunnels and buried structures. Some researchers theorize that certain locations may have properties that affect human perception. Although this remains highly speculative, Sarah also investigated whether there was anything chemical or environmental in the hospital causing the hallucinations. She ordered air quality tests, checked for gas leaks or toxic mold, and examined ventilation systems. All the tests came back normal. There was nothing in the physical environment that could explain the unusual perceptual experiences. The shift in investigative approach, from seeking a human perpetrator to considering broader, less conventional patterns, was gradual but significant. Williams initially resisted, but as weeks turned into months without progress, he became more open to considering that perhaps there were aspects of the case that didn't fit into traditional investigative frameworks. The impact of this research was twofold. On the one hand, it revealed that experiences similar to Jessica's were not so unique. Many healthcare professionals reported similar phenomena, although most did not disappear. On the other hand, the research did not provide definitive explanations or clues that could lead to finding Jessica. Behind the scenes in the nursing community in San Antonio, Jessica's story circulated rapidly and created waves of unease. Many nurses identified with aspects of her experience. Some began sharing their own stories more openly, creating collective awareness that perhaps these experiences were more common and potentially more serious than previously recognized. If you're realizing now that Jessica may not have been the first, nor will she be the last, write this down. The pattern is real. Because now we need to talk about the outcome of the case. Jessica Martinez was never found, neither alive nor dead. Not a trace beyond those footprints that stopped abruptly near the fence. Today, more than 2 years after that November night in 2022, she remains officially listed as a missing person. The case is technically open, but there is no active investigation underway. There are no new leads to follow, no additional witnesses, no evidence that hasn't already been exhaustively examined. In the first 3 months after her disappearance, the search for Jessica was intense and comprehensive. In addition to ground searches around the hospital, investigators expanded to the entire metropolitan area. Rivers and lakes were dredged. Vacant lots were searched. Traffic cameras within a 10-kilometer radius were reviewed. Nothing was found. Jessica's cell phone, which was in her closet, was monitored for months in case it was turned on. It never was. Her bank accounts were monitored for any activity. There was none. Her credit card was never used. There were no attempts to access social media. For all practical purposes, Jessica ceased to exist digitally the same night she physically disappeared. Jessica's family stayed in San Antonio for weeks, waiting for news that never came. Rosa Martinez, her mother, organized volunteer searches on weekends. Miguel, her father, printed thousands of flyers with Jessica's photo. Sophia, her sister, paused her medical studies to help. Carlos, her brother, mobilized students and colleagues. But as weeks turned into months, the family had to confront the devastating possibility that Jessica might never be found. Rosa still keeps Jessica's room exactly as it was. Miguel established a foundation in Jessica's name dedicated to supporting families of missing persons and researching better safety protocols for healthcare professionals. Sophia eventually returned to college, but says that Jessica's memory motivates her every day. Rachel Torres carries a guilt that no amount of therapy has been able to completely alleviate. She constantly wonders if, had she taken Jessica more seriously that afternoon at the cafe, something different might have happened. Rationally, she knows there was probably nothing she could have done, but the heart doesn't always work according to reason. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the way the authorities officially classified the case reveals a lot about the limits of our investigative frameworks when confronted with the truly inexplicable. Detective Williams' final report, submitted 6 months after the disappearance, listed 3 possible theories. The most likely theory, according to Williams, was that Jessica had experienced some kind of acute psychotic episode induced by chronic sleep deprivation. In this interpretation, the figure in the dreams was a hallucination that eventually manifested in the waking state. Jessica was responding to this hallucination when she left the hospital. What happened next is the mystery. Perhaps she climbed the fence in a way that left no obvious evidence, and then continued walking until something stopped her. The problem with this theory is that it doesn't adequately explain the complete absence of any further evidence. In cases of people in psychotic states wandering around, there are usually more clues, more sightings. With Jessica, there's just that line of footprints that stops, and then nothing. The second theory Williams considered was opportunistic abduction. Perhaps someone in the area saw Jessica leaving alone and took advantage of the opportunity. But this theory also has problems. There was no evidence of another vehicle or person. There were no signs of a struggle. And statistically, completely random abductions of adults are extremely rare. The third theory, which Williams lists almost reluctantly, is that something genuinely anomalous was happening that defies conventional explanation. He doesn't speculate on what that might be, only noting that the parallels between Jessica's dreams and the circumstances of her disappearance are statistically improbable to be coincidental, but that there is no investigative framework to process phenomena that appear to be paranormal or supernatural. Behind the scenes at the police department, there is debate about the case. Some investigators firmly believe there must be a rational explanation they simply haven't discovered yet. Others, including Detective Sarah Chen, are less certain. Sarah wrote an unofficial report, suggesting that perhaps it's time to consider that there are phenomena related to human consciousness that current science doesn't adequately understand. The impact of the case on the San Antonio medical community was significant. Many hospitals implemented new safety protocols, including systems where no employee should leave the building alone during night shifts. More attention is being paid to the mental health and sleep patterns of nurses, and there is more openness to discussing unusual experiences without fear of ridicule. Methodist Hospital also made physical changes. That exit door was repaired, and there are now additional cameras covering the entire side parking lot. The area near the dumpsters was better lit. These changes won't bring Jessica back, but perhaps they'll prevent something similar from happening. The hidden truth that Jessica's case forces us to confront is that there are limits to what we can know and understand with our current investigative tools. There are cases that defy explanation, that resist our attempts to categorize them. And Jessica Martinez, the dedicated nurse who tried to warn someone about the figure in her dreams hours before disappearing, is one of those cases. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because Netta's case raises questions that go far beyond the obvious. We can keep trying to fit this story into rational explanations all the time, but there comes a point when you need to stop and ask yourself, what if some dreams really do function as warnings? What if there is something that our minds pick up on, something that our waking senses can't process, but that emerges with full force in dreams? This possibility is not new. Cultures around the world, for millennia, have treated dreams as portals, as messages, as ways to access information that everyday reality hides from us. And even though modern science has tried to reduce everything to chemical and neuronal processes, there are cases like Netta's that defy any attempt at simplification. Think about it. She started dreaming about that man repeatedly. It wasn't a random dream, the kind you have once and forget. It was recurring, detailed, visceral. She could describe physical features, clothes, even the sense of threat he conveyed. And then, months later, a man with identical characteristics breaks into her house and kills her. How do you explain that in a purely logical way? Coincidence? Maybe. But how many coincidences need to happen before you start to consider that maybe there's a pattern, a connection we're not seeing? One of the theories that emerges here is that of genuine premonition. The idea that Netta somehow had access to a future event through dreams. This goes against everything we've learned about how time works, right? But there are studies, albeit controversial, about extrasensory perception, about how some people seem to have a greater sensitivity to capturing information that hasn't yet physically manifested. What if Netta had that? What if for some reason we don't understand she managed to see what was coming and her subconscious tried to warn her in the only way it could, through dreams? But there's another layer to this story that's equally disturbing. What if, by talking about her dreams, by sharing the fear she felt, Netta inadvertently drew attention to herself? Imagine that someone close to her, or someone who heard about her accounts, decided to use that information. This person could have dressed similarly to the description of the man in her dreams, could have planned everything to make it seem like a fulfilled premonition. It would be a macabre manipulation, but not impossible. Sometimes, the fear we express can become a vulnerability that others exploit. It's a cruel but real truth. Human predators are masters at identifying weaknesses and using them to their advantage. This duality is what makes the case so distressing, because it's impossible to know for sure which of these possibilities is correct, and perhaps we never will. But what is evident is that Netta was afraid. She was asking for help in her own way, and this was ignored or minimized. How many times do we do this? How many times does someone close to us express fear, a strange feeling, a bad premonition, and we dismiss it as paranoia, as exaggeration? Society teaches us to be rational, not to listen to intuitions, to dreams, to these signs that don't fit into the logic of everyday life. But what happens when these signs are real? What happens when ignoring them is precisely what allows the tragedy? There's a huge difference between irrational paranoia and justified fear. Paranoia is when you create threats where none exist, when fear consumes your life without any real basis. But justified fear is that which arises from a genuine perception of danger, even if you can't explain where it comes from. And the great challenge is knowing how to differentiate between the two. In Netta's case, was what she felt paranoia, or a real warning that her body and mind picked up before her consciousness could process it? The answer matters less than the action that should have been taken. Someone should have taken her seriously. Someone should have investigated, protected, supported her. But they didn't. This leads us to a broader reflection on how we deal with the fear of others. We live in a culture that values strength, resilience, and not showing weakness. And this is dangerous, because it creates an environment where asking for help, expressing vulnerability, or admitting that something is wrong is seen as a sign of weakness. When someone says they are afraid, the automatic response is often, "Relax, it's nothing. You're exaggerating, it's all in your head." But what if it isn't? What if that fear is a survival instinct trying to shout louder than reason? Ignoring these signs can have irreversible consequences. And there's more. Netta's case also forces us to think about the thin line between what is real and what is perception, because in the end, her reality was that she was afraid. It doesn't matter if the man in her dreams was a premonition, a psychological manifestation of anxiety, or something completely different. Her fear was real. And when you are afraid, especially with a deep and constant fear like the one she describes, your quality of life changes completely. You don't sleep well. You don't trust anyone. You don't feel safe, even inside your own home. And that is already a type of trauma, regardless of what happens afterward. So perhaps the question shouldn't just be, can dreams predict the future? But rather, how can we create a space where people feel safe to express their fears without being ridiculed? How can we develop a greater sensitivity to perceive when someone truly needs help? Because, in the end, Netta's tragedy could have been avoided if someone had taken her seriously. If someone had looked beyond the surface and seen that it wasn't just a bad dream, but a cry for help. And this doesn't just apply to extreme cases like this. It applies to everyday life, to the small expressions of discomfort that people around us show. That friend who keeps saying they're feeling strange. That colleague who casually mentions that someone makes them uncomfortable. That family member who insists something isn't right. We need to stop minimizing these things. You need to create a culture where listening, truly listening, is the standard response. Because sometimes just being heard makes a person feel less alone, less vulnerable. And in some cases, like Netta's, listening can literally save a life. Comment below. I'll pay more attention to the signs. If you've made it this far, I know this content resonated with you in some way. And that means a lot because it's not an easy subject, it's not something we talk about every day. But that's precisely why I make these videos. So we can look at these stories, at these cases that challenge our understanding, and take something from them that helps us better understand the world, the people around us, and even ourselves. If this type of content resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring these themes with me, subscribe to the channel. It's not just about engagement, it's not just about numbers. It's because here we build a community of people who aren't afraid to ask the tough questions, who want to go beyond the surface, who understand that the stories carry lessons that need to be shared. And when you subscribe, you ensure you won't miss any of this content that I prepare with such care for you. And look, if you really stayed until the end, comment below. I'm with you until the end. I read all the comments, I see each one of you who interacts, and that shows me that there are people on the other side who are in this journey together. This kind of connection is what makes it all worthwhile. Leave a like too, because that helps more people find this video, more people who need to hear this message, who need to understand that paying attention to the signs, both our own and those of others, can make all the difference. A like is a simple way for you to say, this has value, this needs to be seen. And because I know you want more, there's a video over here that will take you even deeper into this universe. Click and continue with me there, because the conversation doesn't end here. We're just getting started.